Hey there, you're welcome to this week's Tech Tuesdays webinar on AWS S3 Bucket Connectivity with IICS CDI. I'm Brenda, your host for today's webinar. Today we have Shubham Goyal, Senior Software Engineer from the Informatica Global Customer Support Team with us as the presenter for this webinar. He has years of hands-on experience with cloud data integration. Before we start this webinar, here are some housekeeping tips. This webinar is for 1 hour, including the Q&A session for 15 minutes to the end of this webinar. You can post your questions in the Q&A box. Dial-in participants are muted for this webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success Portal. The recording will be emailed to you as well. You can put in your feedback and suggestions for the session in the post-webinar survey. The Tech Tuesdays webinar program is hosted within the Success Portal. The Informatica Success Portal is a microlearning platform offering free and unlimited learning to all registered users. This feature-rich platform was launched to help you learn and use Informatica products better. Here are a few important links that you can go over later that will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Shubham. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Brinda. I hope all of you are doing good. In this Tech Tuesday webinar, we will discuss on AWS S3 Bucket Connectivity with IICS CDI. The agenda of today's webinar is Introduction, Basics of AWS S3, Prerequisites, Minimal S3 Bucket Policy, Amazon S3 V2 connection properties, Authentication and encryption, Designing integration, demo AWS S3 V2 followed with a Q&A. Before starting the connectivity, let's have an understanding of AWS S3 basics. S3 is Amazon's object simple storage service. It is highly durable, scalable and fast, secure storage system that is highly available via a web interface for you and me to upload and download any amount of data from anywhere in the world. We can break down these marketing terms into layman terms. What is object storage? Object storage is where every file is an object as opposed to a file in a file system. A file system needs an operating system, but object storage doesn't. So you can think of S3 is like a hard drive you have on the cloud. Your data or files are all stored as objects. The objects are stored in buckets. So now you can think of bucket is like a folder on your hard drive. Then what is durable? Every time you upload something to S3, it gets replicated to multiple hard drives across multiple zones on AWS. That way, you can never really lose anything on AWS. With respect to availability, S3 is highly available because AWS guarantees the availability to be 99.99%. And with respect to scalability, S3 allows you to store unlimited amount of data, and the size limit per file is 5 TB. That is quite huge. And with respect to security, your data can be encrypted in S3 using Amazon provided encryption tools. So you can think of S3 is like a virtual drive to store and retrieve data. According to AWS definition on S3, you can use Amazon S3 to store and retrieve any amount of data at any time from anywhere on the web. So and these S3 are stored in the bucket, and these bucket names should be unique globally because when we create a bucket in S3, it will have a unique URL. And it is always a good practice to create bucket in the nearest region for you and for your customers. Now let's see the prerequisites. You can connect to AWS S3 bucket with IICS using Amazon S3 V2 connector. To use Amazon S3 V2 connector, you need to ensure that org admin performs the following tasks. First is create a minimal Amazon S3 bucket policy for Amazon S3 V2 connector. The minimal Amazon S3 bucket policy restricts user operations and access to particular S3 bucket by assigning an AWS IAM policy to user. you need to use minimum required action for users to successfully read data from and write data to Amazon S3 bucket, like put object, get object, delete object, get bucket ACL, list bucket. As well as if complex file is used in reading or writing, then make sure that either Cloudera 5.8, Cloudera 6.1, Hortonworks 2.5, Hortonworks 2.6 packages are added. Only one of them. Okay. Now let's see how to configure AWS S3 V2 connection in IICS. So this is our IICS admin page where under connections, we create a new connection. And in this, first option will be connection name. So here you have to define the name of the connection. Then description. This is optional. You can provide the description of the connection. Then the type. Type here is Amazon S3 V2 connection. Is how we are connecting using Amazon S3. Then in the runtime environment, you have to provide the name of the runtime environment where you want to run the tasks. Under the connection section, you can see access key and secret key. So access key, you have to provide the access key to access the Amazon S3 bucket. And in the secret key, you have to provide the secret access key to access the Amazon S3 bucket. Now, this depends upon the authentication method. Like in case of basic authentication, you need to provide the actual access key value. In case of IAM authentication, you do not provide the access key value. And in case of temporary security credentials via assume role, you need to provide the access key of an IAM user with no permission to access Amazon S3 bucket. And if you're using assume role for EC2, then do not provide the access key value. Now you will see IAM role ARN. So this IAM role ARN is Amazon resource name of the IAM role assumed by the user to use the dynamically generated temporary security credentials. You can enter the value of this property only if you want to use the temporary security credentials to access AWS resources. And even if you remove the IAM role that enables the secure agent to access the Amazon S3 bucket and create a connection, the test connection will be successful. Now, in case of external ID, this is an optional field where you have to specify the external ID for a more secure access to Amazon S3 bucket when the Amazon S3 bucket is in a different AWS account. So sometimes we see these use case scenarios for partner bucket. Now, under use EC2 role to assume role. So this is again optional. We need to select the checkbox to enable the EC2 role to assume another IAM role specified in the IAM role ARN options. The EC2 role must have a policy attached with a permission to assume an IAM role from the same or a different account. Now, under folder path, you can specify the bucket name or complete folder path to the Amazon S3 object. You need not to provide the slash at the end of the folder path. Like for example, here Infa GCS Redshift staging, this is my bucket name. And if I want to provide the folder name, then let's say Shubham. I need not to provide the slash after it, just Shubham will work. Now, there is now for encryption, there is symmetric key and customer master key ID. Now, these two fields are again optional, where we provide a 256-bit AES encryption key in the base 64 format, where when you enable a client-side encryption, you can generate a key using third-party tool. Now, in case of customer master key ID, this is again optional, where you specify the customer master key ID or any alias name generated by AWS key management service like AWS KMS, or AWS resource name like ARN of your custom key for cross account access. You must generate the customer master key for the same region where Amazon S3 bucket resides. You can specify two types of master keys. One is like customer generated customer master key or default customer master key, where both enables the client side or server side encryption. And in case of default customer master key, only the admin user of the account can use the default customer master key ID to enable client side encryption. Now, these two fields are mostly used for the encryption purpose. Now, under the region name, you have to specify the AWS region of the bucket that you want to access, that you can get it from this drop down list. Now, there is something federated SSO IDP. Now, in case of SAML 2.0 enabled identity provider for the federated user single sign-on to use the AWS account, Amazon S3 V2 connector supports only ADFS 3.0 identity provider. And you can select none if you do not want to use federated user single sign-on, like I have used here none. And then there you will be seeing other authentication type as well, where there is none in credential profile file authentication. So you can select the credential profile file authentication option to access the Amazon S3 credentials from a credentials file that contains access key and secret key. Now if we test the connection here, we'll see that the test connection is successful. And if there will be any error, you will see the error here with test connection failure with the error message. Now here we have just provided the access key and the secret key because we are using the basic authentication with the folder path and the region name. Now if we go here, we have discussed about Amazon S3 V2 connection details and connection properties. Now let's see the Amazon S3 V2 connector authentication methods. The Amazon S3 V2 connector supports the five type of authentication methods. First, you can configure the basic authentication by providing the access key and secret key values. You can configure IAM authentication when secure agent runs on AWS EC2 instance. So for IAM authentication, you need to first create a minimal Amazon S3 bucket policy. Then you have to create a Amazon EC2 role, and then you have to link the minimal Amazon S3 bucket policy with Amazon EC2 role. And once that is done, then you have to create a EC2 instance and assign the generated EC2 role to that EC2 instance. Now your EC2 instance is ready, and then you have to install the secure agent on that EC2 system. Similarly, now for temporary security credentials, you can configure the temporary security credentials using assume role to access the AWS resources from the same or different AWS accounts. So for temporary security credentials using assume role, you need to ensure that you have STS assume role permission and trust relation established within the AWS accounts to use the temporary security credentials. The trust relationship should be defined in the trust policy of the IAM role when you create the role. The IAM role adds the IAM user as a trusted entity, allowing that IAM user to use the temporary security credentials and access the AWS accounts. You can configure the credentials profile file authentication to access Amazon S3 credentials from a credentials file that contain access token, secret token, and the session token. So for credentials profile file authentication, you can use permanent IAM credentials or temporary security credentials with a session token when you use credentials profile file authentication. You need to make sure that the credentials file must be on the same machine when the agent is installed. You can also configure federated user single sign-on as part of an authentication to securely control access to AWS S3 resources. Okay, now let's move on designing integration using mappings and mapping tasks in IICS CDI. So the first thing is source transformation. So let's go to IICS. This is my IICS UI, in which this is how we use Amazon S3 V2 in a source transformation. This is a source transformation. Here first we select the connection, then type of source type, like we can either parameterize here or we can select the single object. I'm using single object here. Then we can select that object, like in this case, since my bucket is Infa GCS Redshift staging, I am using order.txt as a file in this staging object. So this order.txt I have selected here. Now I have an option here as a format also, like what should be the format of that file. Here I'm using delimited. You can select either Avro, Parquet, ORC or JSON as well. Now we have some advanced properties as well here in the source transformation, in which like there is one property, source type. You have an option to select either file or a directory here. Like we can see here, source type has a file or a directory. And if you select here, like Amazon S3 V2 connector provides an option to override the value of folder path or file name properties during runtime. Like we can see here, folder path and file name, whatever value we will provide here, those values will be taken during runtime. And as I've told you, you already have an option to select the type as a directory. And if you select it as a directory, then file name is not honored. Then we have an encryption type here. Like encryption type means the method you want to use to decrypt the data. Then the staging directory. Staging directory is like the path of the local staging directory. Hadoop performance tuning options is not applicable for Amazon S3 V2 connector. And in the compression format, you can select like what how the Amazon S3 V2 connector should decompress the data when you read it from S3 bucket. Then there is option like download part size. That means that how it downloads the part size of an Amazon S3 object in bytes. Then like multi-part download threshold. It means that minimum threshold size to download an Amazon S3 object in multiple parts. Then we have this option of temporary credentials duration. So this is the time duration during which an IAM user can use the dynamically generated temporary credentials to access that AWS resource, like in this case, S3 bucket. Then again, we have this tracing level. So this tracing level is not applicable as of now in Amazon S3 V2 Connect. Okay, after using Amazon S3 V2 connector in the source, let's see. So then we can use Amazon S3 V2 connector in the target as well. So let's see how we use it in the target transformation. So this is a target transformation, and here we can select Amazon S3 V2 in the target. So it means that you can read data from any source, and then you can write to Amazon S3 bucket. Here you will select the connection what we have created. Then we have an option again here like target type as single object or parameter, where you can parameterize the object here, and then the object name, like with what name you want the file to be saved in S3 bucket. And then after selecting that, in what format you want it to be saved, like it can be delimited, Avro, Parquet, ORC, or JSON, and what operation you want to perform on that file. And then similarly, we have some advanced properties here with the target transformation as well. Like override file if exists. Like if I have a file with the same name in the S3 bucket, then you want to override that or not. You have a checkbox for that. And for folder path and file name, told you that Amazon S3 Video Connector provides an option to override the value of folder path and file name during runtime. And encryption is similar like as of the source. Like here you have an option like client side encryption, server side encryption with KMS, and Informatica encryption. So this client side encryption is a technique to encrypt data before transmitting the data to the Amazon S3 server. So client side encryption uses a master symmetric key, which is 256-bit AES encryption key in base 64 format, or a custom master key. Then we have an option here to select server-side encryption as well. So server-side encryption is like encryption type. If you want Amazon S3 to encrypt the data using Amazon S3 managed encryption keys, then you want to write to the target. And you can select it with AWS KMS as well, key management service. So server-side encryption with KMS is like the encryption type. If you want Amazon S3 to encrypt the data using AWS KMS managed customer master key encryption keys, when you write to the binary or flat file target. Then similarly, staging directory, like the path of the local staging directory, and Hadoop performance still it's not supported yet. And then compression format, like how you want to compress the data when you are writing to Amazon S3. And like part size, these all stand same as what it was for the source. Similarly, like temporary credentials duration. is also the similar in the target, like the time duration during which an IAM user can use the dynamically generated temporary credentials to access the AWS resources. So these advanced properties are somewhat similar uh, as what we have seen in the source and what we have seen in the target. Okay, now let's come to the demo part. I'll be showing you a demo on how to read data from and write data to S3 bucket using AWS S3 V2 connector in IICS. This is my job where I'm reading data from Amazon S3 bucket and I'll be writing to a flat file. This is the source transformation where I have selected the connection as Amazon S3 V2 connector, and the object is order.txt, which is present in InfGCS Redshift staging table. Now, S3 browser is one of the tool using which you can access the S3 bucket. Now, this is my bucket InfGCS Redshift staging, in which order.txt is one of the txt file, which I am trying to move to a flat file connection using IICS. So here, and then I have selected, as we have already discussed in the source transformation part on how to configure Amazon S3 V2 connector as a part of the source. Then in the format, we'll select the format we want, and these all are the additional properties which we have already discussed. And under the field section, I can see the field which as part of that file, and then we'll move to the target. In the target, I'll see the incoming field. This is our incoming field which is coming from the source, and this is our target now. So target, what I'm planning to do here is I'm writing to a flat file connection. This is my flat file connection, which will be writing to one of the Linux box in ICS lab files folder, and this is the object S3 demo1.csv with is the name with which I want my file to be stored in my target. Now operation insert, and then advanced properties are like similar as part of the flat file, and since I'm using create new at runtime, so I'll not be seeing any fields here, and field mapping will also be not there. Now once this mapping is configured, we can validate that mapping and we can run it. We have an option to run the mapping, or we can deploy it to MCT and we can run that. We'll try both. So we deploy to a MCT when I want to configure some additional mapping task parameters, or I want to run it in verbose mode. So this is my agent on which I want to run. I'll run this task. We can check the status of the job in through our monitor tab. This is my all jobs. Once the job is triggered, then we can see it in the running jobs. So the job was started. Now it is in queued state. Now it is running. It's real time. You will be seeing the status here real time under this monitor tab. So the job is running right now and the rows are getting processed. Now the job is successful and I can see the status as success and the rows processed as 199. Now I can validate also through my Linux box. I've logged in my Linux box and I'll try to read that file and see that file came or not. Yeah, I can see that file content. I read the content of that file and I can see the file move from the source Amazon S3 bucket to the target. Now I have an option here to deploy it to MCT and run the job. Like we have an option here, new mapping task. So we use mapping task in the scenarios when I want to run the job in verbose mode, or if I want to configure in additional task parameters. So task name, I'll keep it as same. I'll just add a fix MCT after it. And once I'll create a mapping task, I need not to select the runtime environment again and again as we do it in mapping. And we can define the location also where I want to create this. Next. since the file is already there, I need to remove it. Okay, so yeah, we have an additional option when I'm creating MCT out of it. Like I can run it on a schedule, I can use email notifications, I can use pre-processing command or post-processing command as a part of this mapping. And this is in case of my jobs, my connections, or my objects are parameterized. And this is for the verbose mode, whether I want my data also be traced as a part of a session log or not. And there are some additional session configuration properties which we can configure as per our use cases. And I'll finish it. So with this, my MCT is configured. I just need to run it. So this is how MCT will look, and it's linked with that mapping for what it is configured. Now let me run this mapping task. Again, the job is triggered. I can check it from the monitor. So this is how MCT looks when it runs. So we can see again that it is in the starting mode, and it has turned into queue, and now it's running. Since the file was already there, so I first removed it and then I ran. Job job is still running. Yeah, so we can see that that's how MCT runs. So this is the run for the mapping, and I have deployed this mapping to MCT, and now this MCT ran fine. Now this was with respect to how we configure Amazon S3 V2 connector as a part on how to read data from. Similarly, we can write data too as well. Like we have an option to uh, write to Amazon S3 V2 target. Like this is one of the demo in which I am reading from any file, from a flat file, and I'll be writing to a Amazon S3 bucket. Now in this scenario, my source will be a flat file. Like in my earlier demo, my source was S3 bucket. Now in this you can see I'm using a flat file as a source, and it's just one of the test file what I'm using, which I want to move to my S3 bucket. Now I've selected that file as a part of it, and this is the field which is in that file. Now in the target is where I have configured my Amazon S3 V2, my Amazon S3 V2 connector. Now we can see that SG Amazon S3 V2 connector is that connector in which I am trying to connect to, and object is single, and this is the object what name I want my S3 in. I want this file in my S3 bucket. Similarly, format and operation, and these additional properties, these advanced properties I have already discussed with you. That's it. And then I can deploy it to MCT, and I can run this job. I can run this mapping as well. So this is my mapping name for which I am deploying the MCT. I'll add MCT suffix here, and I want it to run on this agent. And my additional properties here in the schedule tab will be similar as what um, we have seen while reading the data from the S3 bucket. Let me finish it. Now this MCT is saved successfully for S3 as a target. I can run this, for which status I can see here. Job is started. So I have given S3 demo tgt1.csv here. Job is still running. This monitor page will be real time, like you will be seeing the status getting updated here every time. Now it has changed to queued state and it's running. Now the DTM has triggered. And I can see that rows processed one and the job status is success. I can validate through my S3 browser. So this is InfraGCS staging is there, and I can check the file. Like, let me refresh this page. It's loading data. Okay. Now I am inside InfraGCS Redshift staging, and the file I've created was S3 demo tgt1. I can check out for that file here. Yeah, we can see S3 demo tgt1.csv. So that's how we read data from and write data to S3 bucket using Amazon S3 V2 connector in IICS. Okay, now let's see how to configure proxy settings. Some of the organization uses proxy to connect to the internet. To connect to S3 bucket in such scenarios, the secure agent needs to connect to IICS through the proxy server. You can only use an unauthenticated proxy server to connect to IICS, which you can get from your network admin. But you can't use unauthenticated proxy server when you read from complex files. You can configure the proxy server settings through the secure agent in Windows or Linux machine or the JVM option of the secure agent. Now let's see how to configure the proxy through secure agent manager. So to configure the proxy server settings to the secure agent manager, let's say in Windows, we will go to the Windows VM, and this is my machine where the agent is installed in the Windows machine. Let's we'll go to the IICS REST v2 IICS agent installer. So we will this is the agent. Yeah, so this is my Informatica Cloud Secure Agent Manager. Now you need to first launch the Secure Agent Manager. Then you have to click on proxy in the Secure Agent Manager page. So this proxy, this is how we enter or edit any proxy server information. So we'll click on proxy, and then there is an option use a proxy server. So we have to enable this parameter, and then we have to provide the information like proxy host, proxy port. So as I've told you that we can only use an unauthenticated proxy server. It means that it shouldn't have any username and password as an authentication. So you can only use a proxy server or connect to a proxy server which will have only proxy host and proxy port, not username and password in case of configuring a proxy with respect to Amazon S3. So you have to fill these parameters here and then click OK. And the secure agent manager restarts the secure agent to apply those settings. So that's how we do this in we configure the proxy in Windows. Now similarly, in Linux also we can configure the proxy server settings for the secure agent using shell command that updates the proxy.ini file. So proxy.ini file will be the file which will have all the proxy details in a secure agent machine. So let's say this is my Linux machine. So to configure here, you first have to you first need to navigate to the directory where agent is installed. So this is my info agent folder where my secure agent is installed. Then in this, we need to go to cd, we need to go in apps folder, then agent core. Then once we are in this folder, we can update the proxy.ini file using the console agent manager script. So if we see here, there is console agent manager.sh. So we are going to use this script to update the proxy.ini file. So the command will be executing the script console agent manager.sh, configure proxy, then it will have proxy host detail. So you have to specify the proxy host here and then proxy port. So you have to specify those values here. So once this is done, you have to execute this script and restart the secure agent. So your proxy settings will be applied in your Linux box. Similarly, you can configure the proxy settings through JVM options of the secure agent as well. So in that scenario, you have to go to IICS UI. So suppose this is my IICS UI. We'll go to the administrators tab. In this, you have to select the runtime environment on which the job is running. So let's say this is IN Shublin 01. This is my secure agent where my job runs. In this, you have to click on edit, and then that once the settings for this is open, you have to select the service as a data integration server, and the type is DTM. Now, in the system configuration details section, you have to make these changes. Like you have to select the service as data integration server and type as DTM for data integration services. Then you need to add the parameter in the JVM options field. Like we have 5 options. So if you see, you'll notice sometime that the value of these fields are already filled. So in that scenario, you can use JVM 4 or 5 also. So any JVM options are fine. So let's say if I specify here JVM option 1, the parameter will be -d https dot proxy host equals, and then in JVM option 2 it will be -d https dot proxy port equals. So here you have to specify the proxy host, sorry, it's port, proxy host and the proxy port values, and then you need to click on save. So then those changes will be saved, and the secure agent, a new version of the DIS will be auto deployed, which will have those updated changes. So this is, and the new settings will be applied in the new version of the DIS. So that's how we configure the proxy server settings through JVM options. If you want your connection to go via proxy, and then this was related to configuring the proxy settings. Now let's see Amazon S3 V2 debugging options. So um, sometimes you will have an like to capture the Amazon S3 V2 connector request and response in the session log of the task. You can enable the log level debug property at the agent level. So there will be some scenarios when you want to capture the request or the response sent from IICS platform to S3 bucket. Then that you can do by enabling a log level debug property at the agent level. So the property will be under custom configuration details. Service will be data integration server. then type DTM, subtype would be anything, your name will be log level, and the value of that should be debug. So if we see there, if you see in the UI that how where are those changes. So let's say this is my agent. You have to select the agent on which your job is running. Now then, you have to move till custom configuration details. That will be the last section of that agent configuration. So custom configuration details. Here you have to select the service as data integration server. Then you can select the type as DTM. Subtype is blank. You need not to give anything. The name of that should be log level, and then the value of that should be debug. So this is one custom additional parameter which I am adding in my agent to capture the request and the response. So once that is done, you have to click on save, and then again the changes will be applied in the new version of the deployed DIS. So once the new version of the DIS is applied, you can run the job in that, and the request and response should be captured in the session log for it. So that was how should we use Amazon S3 V2 debugging options. Like that's how we can do more debugging with respect to this connect. So now let's see how next is like troubleshooting options. So some of the common troubleshooting options which you can use with Amazon S3 V2 connector are first, with respect to task failure, with error java.lang.out of memory error, java heap space. So many times you will see that when you are running a job, you will the job is failing with lang java.lang.out of memory error, java heap space. This is very generic error. To troubleshoot in this scenario, you have to understand that why is this error coming. So like this error comes when the JVM machine doesn't have enough Java heap space allocated. So to fix this issue, you need to increase the Java heap space size, which can be added in the system configuration details section with type as GTM for the data integration server and the JVM options. Like for example, in the JVM option, we have specified the proxy details, right? So similarly, in other JVM options, which is free, you can add JVM option one as -XMX. Then you can give any value, like you can allocate either 4 GB, 6 GB, 8 GB depending on your system configuration. And then similarly, in other scenario, it is noticed that when you are reading from a CSV file that contains a string name null, the task will not write anything to the target. So to fix the issue, in that scenario, you need to configure the custom property ff parser retain null string, which can be added in the custom configuration details section where we have added log level debug. With type as Tomcat JRE for the data integration services, and you have to specify the name as ff parser retain null string and value as true, and then you can click save, and the new version of the DS will have updated changes. That's pretty much sums up about AWS S3 Bucket Connectivity with IICS. Then you can use Amazon S3 V2 connector guide. The documentation is really good, and it has all the configuration details with respect to in designing the mapping, as well as all the authentication methods what we have discussed, and temporary security credentials, IAM authentication, like the most of the needed details to configure your use cases. It's pretty much it's well documented there. In that there is one FAQ also, you can refer that. So we'll be open for QA session now. um, Thank you.
Hello everyone, please post your questions in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer them. Shubham, we have few questions over here. One from Harsha.
So there's one question. There's one question. What kind of file types are supported? So we do support delimited, ORC, JSN, Parquet, Avro. We support those files in source and tab. And then there is one question from Ajit. Will the webinar be available as a recording? Yeah, it will be available as a recording. There is one question from Sujit. Can we perform indirect file load using S3 V2 connector? So if with indirect file loading you mean working with multiple files, so yeah, we have a option in S3 V2 connector where working with manifest files, you can use that.
Thank you, Shubham.
Sure.
And Ajit, the recording will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success Portal. From Success Portal, you will also be able to download the slide deck. Yes, you will also receive a recording link to the webinar. Another question from Neeraj, Shubham. Can we take that?
Yeah, there is a scenario of landing zone where S3 is used as a landing zone, Oracle to S3 to Snowflake. Can you write to S3 and target database Snowflake in the same mapping? Yeah, you can use a mapping where you can use two targets. One will be pointing to S3, another will be Snowflake. We have Snowflake connection as well.
And adding on top of that, if you directly choose Snowflake as the target, I think it basically does the same. It will stage the data into S3 if you are on Amazon and then load it to Snowflake.
Right.
We have another question, Shubham.
Yeah. So we have a question from Harsimrat. Can you use third-party API REST API to do transformation on a column in the mapping? So you can use REST API transformation as of now in the source, in the target, and the lookup. So as of now, for specific mapping, you cannot use any REST API to do a transformation. Though you can do a transformation in the data later, but with the API currently in CDI, it's not there. Is there a sandbox environment where this exercise can be practiced? Yeah, you can use Informatica IICS CDI for a trial for 30 days, and you can practice it there.
So it doesn't, we do not have a S3 instance where you can practice. You may have to have your S3, but the connector can be available for trial, which is through add-on bundles or add-on connectors.
Right.
So Shubham, we don't have any new questions coming in. Would you like to call out any previous questions that we have already answered?
Yeah, so there was one question where it was asked about what does it mean to parameterize a source type. So many a times we see a scenario where we need to change the source or the target object to a connection at the runtime, and we don't want to define it before. This helps most of the time in exporting or importing the code, as well as where you want to use where you want to avoid redundancies. So in that case, we can parameterize the connections to objects in a mapping and later can be defined while deploying a mapping configuration task. So I just wanted to explain this part in detail.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harshit from Fidelity. When needed, definitely we can take it as a feedback for Snowflake V2 connector, and we would like to have a synthesis. We'll arrange that. We can arrange that Snowflake V2 connector. We can take that as feedback.
Sure. We can take that up, Shubham. After this session, you can go through the survey link that will be sent to you. You can post your suggestions and feedback for the Tech Tuesdays webinar. Looks like we have answered most of the questions, and if we have failed to answer any of your questions, you can let us know. Also, if there are some questions pending to you, we'll get back to you after this webinar. Thank you for joining this webinar thank you, Shubham, for the wonderful session. Thanks everyone for joining. See you on our next Tech Tuesdays. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Have a good day.